Is the U.S. still a world leader? I'm beginning to have my doubts. When I heard that President Trump was preparing an order to close the Department of Education, I had to go to the U.S. Department of Education website to see if it was true. Sure enough, a letter from Secretary Linda McMahon is on the website. The letter informs the American public that McMahon's final task will be to dismantle the U.S. Department of Education. I suspect that some of you are ready to click out of this video already because you see NPR and it's not a reliable source of news for you. I'm going to try to be as unbiased as possible and as fair. I've left the watermarks and the logos in place for all of the sources where I have collected the data. Was closing the Department of Education a mandate? Far from it. President Trump was elected by less than 50% of the popular vote, only 1.5% higher than Kamala Harris, who was thrown into the race by the Democrats at the last minute out of desperation. Republicans and Democrats have wide partisan differences about most agencies, and the Department of Education is just one. I get it. Republicans want education to be under state and local control. They prefer local and state funding over an increased federal investment. They often advocate for tax cuts, even when cuts limit school budgets. Republicans think vouchers and school choice can improve schools. Democrats believe school choice erodes funding for public schools and weakens them. The parties disagree on the presence of religion, censorship, and social justice issues. Favorability ratings are complete opposites. I've always thought of myself as a moderate with an ideological position that most people would characterize as a centrist. I reject views that I see as radical or extreme on the liberal-conservative spectrum. And I realize that many people will characterize me as a liberal, blue, or a Democrat because I'm from Massachusetts. I'm an independent trying to make sense of American politics with two parties I cannot identify with. Public schools are part of the fiber of our communities, our states, and our country. Over 90% of the U.S. population attends public schools. Yet Washington politicians are 4 times more likely to send their children to private schools. States provide varying amounts of aid to local schools. I live in Massachusetts, where the state percentage is 40%. The U.S. average is 46%. But in Massachusetts, local property taxes account for 52% of the local funding of schools on average, and in the community where I live, it is even higher than 52%. Here's a rough breakdown of how the funding works for Massachusetts schools. The cost per pupil in Massachusetts is one of the highest in the nation at $22,913. The state provides a little over $9,000. Federal funding is a little over $1,500. The remainder of the tuition comes from local property tax of over $12,000 on average. Wealthy suburbs pay slightly more, and poorer cities pay slightly less. Here's where I suspect we might disagree. I believe education is an investment in the future of America. What do you think? Does education make a difference? Did you know that blue states account for 71% of America's gross domestic product, where red states produce 29% of our income and wealth? The median family income in blue states is more than $10,000 greater than red states. And did you know that residents in blue states live 2.2 years longer on average than residents in red states? Have you ever heard of the Human Development Index score? A score is higher when the lifespan is higher, the education level is higher, and the gross income per capita is higher. Look how it plays out in the United States. Education and wealth make a difference. The top 5 states are blue, and the bottom 5 states are red. This is a list of social issues that plague both red and blue states. Unfortunately, red states have higher incidence of all of these social problems. Is higher spending the answer? Not entirely, but it certainly helps provide a quality education. There's no surprise that the top states in spending per pupil are blue states, with the exception of Alaska, with its own geographic challenges. Conversely, states with the lowest spending per pupil are all red states. Which states have more college graduates? Why are we so divided? Did you know that wealthier states send more to Washington than they receive in aid? Donor states who send more are all blue, and recipient states who send less are all red. In this graphic, donor states are colored in orange, and recipient states are shades of blue and gray. Massachusetts residents send an average of $4,846 in additional tax revenue to Washington. Or you can say Massachusetts residents receive 77 cents for every dollar they send to Washington. I've always believed that it was the responsibility of wealthier states to share their wealth with those that are still developing so that they can grow and improve. After all, we are the United States of America. But my feelings have changed. All we hear now from Washington is blue states do everything wrong as communists, Marxists, and liberals. I have to admit, I sometimes think it might be better for Massachusetts to secede from the Union. Perhaps Canada would take us, or would it be possible to rejoin the mother country, now known as the United Kingdom? It pains me to point out the economic disparity that exists within our country. America's strength comes from the diverse work skills found from state to state. America's hardworking, productive farmers and factory workers should not be pitted against researchers seeking cures for diseases or workers inventing new technologies to help America hold its position as a world leader. We have to admit that economic disparity exists between blue and red states. That's why red states rely more on federal funds. And that's why dismantling the U.S. Department of Education will impact red states in a disproportionate way. You can accuse me of presenting fake news to you or cherry picking the data that I use to present this case. I admit that it's impossible to present this without bias, particularly coming from New England. I didn't have to look hard to find this data, and the picture is very consistent. That is, the strongest schools are typically found in blue states. I'm happy to live in Massachusetts, where I can invest in the future of our children. Education is crucial for societal progress. Education fosters informed citizens, increases economic growth, promotes innovation, and brings us together as a nation. America should have the best schools in the world so that we can provide our children with the skills and talents they will need for global competitiveness. The United States should be a beacon for the world.